Hi guys, so in this video I wanted to talk about making notes. It is something that takes up a lot of student time. Making notes is one of those things that I guess we all assume that is a part of the process of studying biology for most people. So let's put notes in the process. So we got notes, you might have a lesson, and more and more these things kind of don't happen in the traditional order. So you have your lessons, and at some point you may read your textbook. You'll use the book to make notes. After you make your notes, you will revise. After you do your revision, you will work through your exam questions. Okay, so we're going to focus on the notes today, primarily because I found myself giving people a lot of advice on making notes, and I thought, well, maybe it's something that might be useful more widely. What I will discuss is what I think are the kind of main mistakes that people make while making notes, and then go about maybe suggesting a few things that you'll want to do to improve that part of the process. What's the purpose of making notes? So for me, this moment in time, I consider the point of making notes, there's two things. Okay, so the first point of making notes, first and foremost, and the more exam boards change over time with the way that they are assessing student understanding and knowledge, the more it's moving towards understanding as opposed to knowledge. So the first point of making notes should be to help you understand the content. Okay? Two, the second point is obviously, this is what we all do for making notes, is it's a kind of record, summary, or to somehow condense the information that we might encounter in a textbook or some other resource. Okay, and then if we do those things properly, then we have notes that we can revise from. We have notes that we can revise from, and then we can apply that knowledge in an exam question scenario. So for me, this is why you make notes. The problems arise, I believe, where we tend to forget that notes are for that first purpose also, and we just focus on recording information, summarizing that information. We focus too much on point number 2 and not enough on point number 1. So what are the main things that go wrong in this process? How can we make that process better? So what happens when this process goes wrong? I think three main things go wrong. First is we may record too much information. Okay? So we're transferring too much information from the textbook into our notes, and there's not enough condensing and summarizing happening. We're essentially just transferring information over. The other thing is, we spend too much time making those notes. And so not only we've got notes that are basically ineffectual, we're spending too much time doing it, and that might make us think that we're doing a lot of work and getting a lot of stuff done, but actually a lot of time is being wasted not helping us understand anything, but we think we are. So it's giving us like a false sense of security that we are working very hard, but it's actually not helping us progress in the subject, not improving our understanding. And finally, as I've already hinted, too much info affects your revision. Time is wasted. Finally, you haven't really done anything much to really improve on your understanding of concepts. You might have collected lots of information, but possibly you haven't understood it, you haven't really interrogated that information according to what you understand and married those two up nicely, and so again you've ended up using a lot of time and not made much progress. Okay, so these are the kind of main pitfalls. Okay, these are the things that go wrong. Let's now look at them in detail and see how we can resolve them. My first thing to address, so point number one, first mistake is making the whole notes making process very passive. Okay, and we'll put that down to reading passively. Okay, so we're reading the textbook, but we're only looking at it to collect information. That looks important, I'll take it. That looks important, I'll take it. We're not really making a decision about what's important and what's not important. And even if we want to do that, we haven't maybe equipped ourselves well enough to be able to make that decision. So, obviously, the answer to that is read actively. And I won't leave it there. I will suggest that in order to read actively, you need to read with a purpose. You need to know what you're looking for as you read that passage. And if you do know what you're looking for, then you've got a purpose to read that. So you're not just sitting there reading it, absorbing everything that comes along. You have a few things that you are looking for, and you're reading for that to help. You're looking for a particular set of information, key facts, words, whatever, an idea that will help you to understand the thing that you're looking for. So you need to read actively, you've got to read with a purpose. What does that mean in terms of your biology specification? It means you do have to read your spec. I'm not talking about back to front. What I'm saying is, if you have a particular topic that you're looking at, then go to that section of your specification, find the topic that you're supposed to be covering, and then find out what your specification details in relation to that topic. And then as you read your textbook, you're waiting for that information to come up. You're actually looking for that information as you read. Okay? So that will help you to read actively, and it's going to help you make better decisions about what's important, from the textbook, what's information that is important for you to recall later, and what information is there in a contextual level to kind of help you to understand the main ideas. Because once you understand the main ideas, you don't necessarily need contextual information. You need the key points to take away, learn, and then reproduce and use later on. Okay? So we'll just kind of extend this. So once you do have that, if you're reading actively, and once you know what specifically you're looking for, it will allow you to separate kind of key concepts and details from information that is context. Okay? Now, contextual information shouldn't technically be required for assessment purposes, but key concepts and details is. So if you know what's on your specification, it will help you make that decision a bit better, and you might find that you're better able to filter out and summarize and condense your information when you're making your notes. Let's move on to the next point. Right, 2, and I think this might be the most important one. Okay, so the other mistake that I think people make while they're reading the textbook, it's not necessarily a mistake, it's just something that we get trained into, I suppose, after a certain amount of reading. it's not questioning the text. Okay, so what I mean by that is we're just reading the textbook, and everything that we're reading we're just accepting as fact and moving on. Okay, but what we have to get into the habit of doing is questioning after every word, sentence and paragraph, did that just make sense? What I just read, does that fit with my understanding and my knowledge up to this point? Because if you're doing biology properly, or possibly any subject, any new information that you learn, you're building on previous learning that you've done, previous knowledge, previous ideas. And any new information should fit with that. And if it fits with that, it will make sense to you. But if it doesn't fit with that, it won't make sense. And you won't recognize it as important. And if it doesn't make sense, you're just remembering it. And if you're just remembering it just for the sake of memorizing it, that's not learning. Okay? So, and that's not going to allow you to apply those ideas in a different context. So, questioning the text is important. I'll just give you an example. So, if there's a passage that reads, so this is referring to a biological concept. So let's say I have this little section. Protons are pumped into the thylakoid space. Protons diffuse into the stroma through ATP synthase, resulting in ATP synthesis. Now, that all sounds very important, and if I'm not really questioning what I'm reading, I might just transfer everything without even thinking about it, because clearly it's all very important. However, when I'm reading the textbook, I really need to ask myself why all this is happening, based on what I might have learned in the past. So based on my basics, does this make sense? Okay, so I really need to be thinking about protons, the fact that the protons are positively charged. I really need to be thinking about what that word means. Pumped is referring to some sort of active transport. So the protons are being actively transported into this area called the thylakoid space. Okay, but if that happens, then that's going to result in a proton gradient, i.e. there's going to be lots of protons in this space and not so many outside in the stroma. Okay, so that's going to mean that there's a chemical gradient of protons, so more protons here than here. That's also going to mean that there's more positive charge here compared to here, and because of that, they will diffuse down that electrochemical gradient. Okay, what's allowing them to move down that gradient is ATP synthase, because protons are positively charged and they can't move through membranes or directly through membranes. And so ATP synthase allows that diffusion, and in that process, ATP synthase being an enzyme that synthesizes ATP, that now makes sense. Now, obviously, I'm a biology teacher, so that's going to make sense to me, but at all times, you need to be making sure that the text that you're reading makes sense in light of your understanding of scientific concepts that you have learned elsewhere, be that physics, chemistry, or other biological concepts. And when that doesn't make sense, you need to resolve that with either one of your colleagues, an online resource or a different textbook, or your teacher. Okay? But one of the biggest mistakes I think people do is not questioning the text, not interrogating it against what they know from previous learning, and therefore just accepting everything as fact. And that again leads to making notes, not understanding what you're making notes about, but only recalling the facts and the facts are not going to help you 7 times out of 10 in modern biology exams. Okay, so there we have it. Not questioning the text, and what we do then is, you know, we read to understand concepts. Must question what we are reading on a more regular basis. Question what we're reading, question our understanding of what we're reading before moving on, before choosing what to transfer into our notes. The last thing I will talk about is going to affect the size of your notes and help kind of, you know, make your summaries effective. Okay, but also understanding, because one of the things that we tend to fall into while doing notes is concentrating on sentences as opposed to paragraphs. Well, paragraphs is fine, but maybe sentences versus sections has a better ring to it. Okay, so this concentrating on sentences is the mistake, and what we'd rather be doing is looking at sections. Okay, what does this mean? What this means is, say if we have a paragraph of some sentences, okay, full stop, full stop, full stop. Okay, so what I remember kind of doing when I was a student and making notes badly was reading a sentence thinking, oh yeah, that's quite important, and then in my notes I'd write that sentence down because that was an important sentence. Okay, then I would read the next sentence and lo and behold, that sentence was important too. So in that sentence would go in my notes. I'd read the next one, that was also a good one, had an important fact in it, important point, and that would go in my notes. And very soon, I'd essentially just be copying out the textbook, okay? And this is dangerous, and you've got to keep a check on yourself that, you know, you shouldn't fall into this habit. So what I suggest is concentrate not on the sentences, so don't write anything in your notes until you've read a section. So it might be a paragraph or it might be a page. Read more, try and read more before you commit to writing something down in your notes. And if you do that, what you'll be doing is automatically you'll be making sense of what you read rather than simply collecting information. Secondly, the other good thing that will happen from this is you will automatically be reformatting or rephrasing the words in this passage. And because of that, you end up with summarized notes, but more importantly, you will have processed that information. And because you've processed that information, you've thought about it, and you're only putting pen to paper because you understand it, that is obviously going to improve your understanding of that concept. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to say about notes. We'll just do a quick recap just to make sure that we've got the key points. We said that the main problems with, you know, that I see when people are making notes is that A, it takes too much time. 2, it's not really helping understanding, okay? So it takes too much time, it's not really effectively helping understanding, and 3, that notes, it's just too many notes. Okay, too much information in notes makes it difficult for you to revise. Okay, you're not condensing that information, so there's too much information that you are trying to get into your head before you do questions, tests, and so on. So, solutions right? And I'm not going to do this in parallel. These are just general solutions, but they should help in all these areas. What we said was solutions was actively reading, and what we said was the way that we're going to make this possible is by referring to the specification. So that's one way to do it. So using the specification to kind of gauge or to find out what it is that we should be looking for when we are reading. Second point, question what we read. We have to interrogate. Every sentence must make sense to us in light of what we have known in the past. And when that doesn't happen, we cannot ignore it, we cannot paper over it, we cannot say that we're going to deal with it later. Okay? So we must question what we read, and we must try not to proceed unless we have resolved that problem. Okay, and only then does that information make it into your notes, because then making your notes becomes a process of understanding and making sure that you get the concepts rather than just information transfer. Okay, so yeah, that might add a little bit of effort, but nobody said this was going to be easy. Last, we are going to focus, or we are going to try to focus on sections, not sentences. Okay, so we're going to try and read a paragraph, we're going to try and read a page, something like that, and then think about what the important ideas were, what the important information was, and then think about it. As long as that makes sense, we're going to incorporate that into our notes. We will not go sentence by sentence, because that is just going to lead to too much information being recorded. Okay, so I think for now, these are the main things that I would like to leave you with. We'll come back to this kind of video. We may talk about how to use exam questions effectively as part of a learning process, not just assessment. That's something I believe in quite a lot. So we'll discuss how to do that effectively. But for now, I will leave you with this. If you have views on notes, if you have some ideas on how to make effective notes, please do share them with your fellow students in the comment section below, guys. And I wish you good luck for your exams.